In the heart of a bustling, cobbled town lived a boy named Finn. This town was a tapestry of sounds, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the chatter of merchants in the square, the laughter of children playing by the fountain. Finn was a special part of this tapestry. He had a knack for weaving people together. He knew everyone's stories. He could make the stern baker smile. He could coax a shy song from the old woman who sold flowers. Finn was the town's quiet joy, a boy who listened more than he spoke. And in his listening, he held the community's heart in his small hands. He believed that every person was a story waiting to be heard, a little light that just needed a bit of encouragement to shine brightly for everyone else to see and appreciate. One gray afternoon, a stranger passed through town. The stranger wore a long coat and a hat that hid his eyes. He saw Finn sharing a piece of bread with a stray cat. He smiled a secret sort of smile. He reached into his coat and pulled out a creature. It was small and quick, like a squirrel, but with fur the color of warm chestnuts and a tail that fizzed with energy. The stranger called him Whiskers. He placed the creature in Finn's hands and said, "He holds all the town's laughter." Then just as quietly as he had arrived, the stranger was gone. Whiskers chirped and chattered, his little body buzzing with a happy, infectious energy that felt like sunshine. Whiskers was everything the stranger had promised. He was a whirlwind of delight. He would dart through the market, his tail a blur of happiness, and a ripple of laughter would follow him. He would sit on Finn's shoulder, whispering nonsensical, joyful things that made Finn giggle. The creature seemed to absorb the town's good feelings. When the baker laughed, Whiskers' fur seemed to glow a little brighter. When the children sang, his chirps became a melody. Finn and Whiskers were inseparable. They were the town's heart and its happy beat, a reminder of the simple, shared moments that stitched their lives together into a beautiful, colorful quilt of community and care. Together, they made the town even brighter. They would visit the lonely, and Whiskers would perform his funny little dances. They would help the weary, and Whiskers' boundless energy would seem to give them strength. The stories of the town grew richer, filled with the adventures of the boy and his spirited friend. The townsfolk would say, "Have you seen Finn and Whiskers today?" Their names became a byword for happiness, for the simple, pure connection that made their town feel like one big, sprawling, slightly chaotic family. Finn felt a deep sense of purpose, a quiet pride in the joy he and his little companion brought to the world around them. One day, the richest merchant in town decided he needed to show off his wealth. He did not buy a new carriage or build a grander house. Instead, he commissioned something extraordinary. He had his artisans create a mechanical hound. It was a marvel of engineering, a creature of gleaming metal and polished gears. Its coat was enameled a brilliant, startling blue. They called it Azure. The merchant paraded Azure through the town square. The hound moved with a perfect clicking grace. It could bow, it could wag its tail. It was a spectacle, a thing made to be watched, and the townsfolk gathered around, their mouths open in awe at its cold, blue perfection. Finn and Whiskers went to see the blue hound, just like everyone else. Whiskers tilted his head, his bright eyes curious. Azure stood perfectly still, its painted eyes staring forward. It didn't chase its tail. It didn't sniff the interesting smells of the street. It simply stood there, waiting for a command, a perfect, lifeless blue thing. The merchant made it perform a series of tricks, each one more complex than the last. The crowd gasped and clapped, but Finn noticed something strange. The applause felt different. It was loud, but it wasn't warm. It was the sound of amazement, not of shared joy or genuine heartfelt connection. That evening, something changed in Whiskers. It started subtly. A patch of his chestnut fur right on his back turned a faint shade of blue. Finn stroked it, confused. The next day, after another of Azure's performances, the blue patch was bigger and darker. Whiskers started trying to copy the hound. He would stand stiffly, trying to hold a pose. He would try to bow, but he would just end up tumbling over in a clumsy heap. He was no longer the fizzing, joyful creature he once was. He was becoming a performer, an actor seeking the same gasps of awe that the blue hound received from the captivated crowd. Finn did not understand what was happening at first. He thought it was a funny new game. He encouraged it. "Look, everyone," he would shout in the market. "Look what Whiskers can do." He would hold Whiskers up, and the little creature, now more blue than brown, would perform his stiff, awkward tricks. He was chasing the crowd's attention, and Finn was chasing it with him. The easy, natural laughter that once followed them was replaced by polite, impressed clapping. They were becoming a spectacle, just like Azure. and the warm, genuine spirit they once shared was slowly being painted over in a cold, lonely shade of blue. Soon, Whiskers was almost entirely blue. His fur, which once felt like soft moss, now had a strange artificial sheen. His energetic chirps were gone, replaced by calculated squeaks designed to get a reaction. He was a sensation. Finn became his showman, taking him from one end of town to the other, putting on shows for anyone who would watch. "The amazing blue Whiskers," he would announce. The townsfolk would gather, their faces upturned, watching the sad little creature perform his hollow tricks. They were entertained, but they were no longer connected. They were an audience watching a show, not neighbors sharing a moment of simple, unadorned life. Finn, caught up in the applause, forgot the real reason Whiskers had been so special. He forgot the quiet visits to the lonely. He forgot the shared giggles and the secret whispers. His focus was now on the performance, on making sure every trick was perfect, on getting the loudest clap. He started spending more time with the merchants, the men who understood the value of a good show. They clapped him on the back and told him he was clever. They saw the crowds he could draw. Finn felt important, seen, and powerful. But a small, quiet part of him felt a growing emptiness he couldn't quite name. The town itself began to change. The easy chatter in the square grew quieter. People stopped sharing their stories as freely. Why tell a small, simple story when there was a grand spectacle to watch? The fabric of the community, once woven with threads of shared laughter and quiet understanding, started to fray. The baker didn't smile as much. The flower seller's songs were heard less often. The town was losing its soul, trading its warmth for the cold gleam of entertainment. Everyone was watching the show, but nobody was seeing each other anymore. The connections that had made their town a home were slowly dissolving into thin air. One evening, after a particularly grand performance, Whiskers looked at Finn. His blue-painted eyes were filled with a profound sadness. The fizz was gone. The joy was gone. All that was left was an exhausted, hollow creature. He gave a tiny, sorrowful squeak, a sound that held all the lost laughter of the town. Then, while Finn was counting the coins the merchants had given him, Whiskers slipped away into the shadows. He vanished as mysteriously as he had arrived. When Finn finally looked up, he was alone. The applause had faded, and all he was left with was a pocket full of cold coins and a deafening silence. Left alone, Finn felt a loneliness so deep it ached in his bones. The silence Whiskers left behind was heavier than any stone. He tried to tell stories like he used to, but the words felt empty without his companion. He turned to the only people who still paid him any mind, the merchants. They welcomed him for a time. They taught him their ways, the art of the spectacle, the craft of turning everything into a show for profit. Finn learned to talk like them, to think like them. He traded his quiet, listening heart for a loud, performing voice. He became a shadow of the boy he once was, a hollow echo in the marketplace. But spectacles, by their nature, must always be new. The town grew tired of the merchants' shows. The blue hound, Azure, gathered dust in a storeroom, and Finn, the boy who was no longer the keeper of stories but just another showman, was no longer useful. The merchants, who had praised him so loudly, now turned their backs on him without a word. They discarded him as easily as an old poster for a forgotten performance. He was left utterly alone in the quiet town square, a ghost haunting the place where laughter used to live, a stark reminder of what had been lost. The town was a changed place. The unity was gone. The shared stories were forgotten memories. People passed each other like strangers, their eyes downcast. The communal heart that Finn and Whiskers had once nurtured had stopped beating. There was no joy, only the memory of it. The town had been sold a beautiful, brilliant lie in the form of a blue hound and a performing squirrel, and it had paid with its very soul. It was a community rich in spectacle but poor in spirit, a collection of lonely people who had forgotten how to connect with one another in any meaningful way. And so, Finn sat by the silent fountain, a boy no longer, but a sad man full of regret. He had chased the roar of the crowd and, in doing so, had lost the one true voice that mattered, the quiet, joyful chirp of a true friend. The tale of Whiskers became a whispered warning in the quiet town, a sad story about the high cost of choosing spectacle over substance. It served as a solemn reminder that the most precious things in life, connection, community, and simple, honest joy, cannot be manufactured or performed. They must be nurtured, shared, and held gently, For once they are lost, the silence they leave behind is a truly heartbreaking thing.